Welcome back, everybody, to Talk of the Now podcast. And I'm your host, Gene, and I've got Russell with us again, Mr. Russell Wall, that works in radio. And Russell, thanks for coming back on such a short notice.
Man, happy to do it. I had so much fun last time, so I was delighted when you asked me to come back.
Really? Oh, I'm glad you were
Yes,
delighted.
yes.
Um, well, last time you came, I had chili, by the way, and that was good chili that my wife made.
Oh, I was jealous. I did have so many questions, and I remember you kind of rattled off some, what goes into it. It did sound good, and I have wanted chili ever since, and I haven't yet had it again, and I was wondering why is it on my mind, and it must have been that podcast.
Ah. um, well, I was trying to think. My wife made not chili, but a soup last night that was really
Okay,
good. It was the old beef kind of vegetable soup that was just right before it's about to get cold here. You know.
delicious.
Um, but this is not a cooking show.
Though it should be.
I what I thought I'd do was maybe we didn't really get well. We got into it, but I just thought we'd kind of further go into a little bit about we're talking about the old days, and
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about my cousin Scotty. We talked about Scotty last time, and most of what we talked about him were the good memories, and that's what we try to live through and think about. Um, Earlier this year, uh, cousin Scotty, some people call him Scott, his cousin Scotty, he died. He passed away, and I didn't really have much contact with him over the last probably 10 plus years. And the last time that I had talked to I've been in touch with his sister a little bit through social media and maybe even email. I got to go back and look at that. But when we had talked, she had told me that he had gone down. I knew that he was gone down a sort of, we'll call it a bad lifestyle. And his sister emphasized how bad it had gotten for him. And and I really felt bad for him. I tried to pray for him. He had reached out to me a couple of times, I'd say over the last probably 5 to 7 years. Every now and then I would get a periodical outreach. Like he would probably he showed up at the house I was living in at one point. I'm just kind of giving context here before we get into some of the, because we want to get into the better memories, I think, of it. That's why I'm doing this, so we don't have to just think about the bad that happened in his life. But he had sent me a message last year, 2023, and his dad died back in December. You probably knew this, Russell. He had sent me a message after his dad died, and it was sort of one of those kind of rant type messages that people might randomly send about how, you know, um, family's special and nobody really talks to him anymore in his family and that sort of thing. Their mom had died back in, I don't know if you remember, maybe 2013.
I couldn't speak to the time, but that probably sounds about right.
Yeah, yeah. About 2013, their mother had died. Long since divorced from their dad, um, going back to the late 80s. And anyway, that's when I last saw Scotty. And oddly enough, it was a weird thing because I want to say maybe could have been 2019, 2020, somewhere around in there. Maybe, I don't know, earlier, sooner or later. This is the last time he called me. He called me randomly on the phone and left me a message. Anyway, that was sort of like the last bit of time. I wasn't really around Scotty that much, and I tried to pray for the guy and, had made thought to reach out at some point. Do you remember the last time you spoke to him, Russell?
It's been just a really long time. So, our connection, mine with yours, is he
Hmm.
was your cousin and he was my best buddy. Lived across the street, and we touched on that before. That just my dearest friend from about the time I was 5 until kind of what you speak of, to about 13. So about seventh grade, and then we grew up together, same grade, same school, same church,
Mm.
even. But somewhere in middle school, he kind of started making some choices different than the ones that I would have made. And then my freshman year, I moved, not all that far away, but 15, 20 minutes away. And that was kind of the end of our day-to-day friendship. And it's tough. So, now well into my 40s, he's still an influential person in my
Mm.
life. The formative years of my childhood, I spent more time with Scotty than probably anybody,
Mm-hmm.
more so than with my brother or my sister. I had other friends in the neighborhood that I loved, and we've told some of those stories. But I spent, there was no one I spent more time with than Scotty from about kindergarten, first grade through middle school. And so then when he goes one way and I go a different way, and then I move away, it was weird then. And it's even weird now to think about how you can lose touch with someone even before you lose touch with them. That our last year or two in close proximity with one another, we were just different people. He was different from the friend that I knew, and I guess I was no longer the friend that he once had. And we didn't have an obvious falling out, but we were falling apart from one another. And then once I moved, that was kind of it. So it's tough because I have fond memories of our childhood, but um, there were also some struggles. It's pretty easy to be friends when you're in elementary school, but then when you get into middle school and you start having some freedoms and you start pushing some boundaries,
Right.
that can be challenging, and it's hard to have conversations. I was thinking about this ahead of our conversation today, that for as much time as he and I spent with one another, we didn't really talk about emotions. And I mean, really, what 12-year-old does. So,
Right.
we'd
Yeah.
play video games together. We would explore the neighborhood together. We
Right.
would, do different activities together, but having heart to heart conversations, we didn't. And I guess that's what I regret, is we never really found a way to do that. Kind of once I was moved on and he moved on, we never really reconnected. I had a couple of
Mm.
chance encounters with him. They were few, 2 or 3 at most, for 2 or 3 minutes at a time.
Ah.
And so it's tough. That's what
Yeah.
that's kind of how I would recap things.
Did you talk to him or see him at his mom's funeral? Do you remember?
Um, I'm thinking about that. I feel as though I must have. I had the
Mhm.
opportunity to speak at her funeral because I counted her as like a second mom and had stories, and she
Yeah.
was just always so welcoming. Her dad too, but I didn't have as many interactions with him. I was around Vicky, his mom, all the time.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's weird. I feel as though I have a missing file with my
Mhm.
memory, because I feel as though surely I must have seen him at her funeral, but I can't recall if I did. It's sad because, sometimes you hear these stories of someone you cared for in any walk of life, and there are
Right.
times where you can maybe see it coming, and then other times people say, I had no idea. And I think the takeaway for me is simply we often don't know what's going on beneath the surface.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, as we go back though, I think we should. I do think that it's good to, like you mentioned, I think on the last episode, that it's good to just remember the good memories and the good times you had with the person. But at the end of the day, um, there was. I think God puts people in our lives for purpose, and I was around Scotty a lot as a kid, just like you were. You were probably closer to him than I was because I only saw him. I saw him about once a week up until about the age of 12 when his parents got divorced. Um, my parents, you may remember this or heard about it, I don't know, but we would literally drive to their house almost every Friday, sometimes Friday and Saturday night, to just hang out with their family.
That's great.
Um, and a lot of times it would involve me just taking my clothes and spending the night for the next 2 nights, you know, just because. Or he would do the opposite if they would come to our house. But a lot of times it would be Friday night, we're going to Stephen Vicky's.
Sure.
And then the next night, my dad said, "You want to go back over to Stephen Vicky's?" We go there again. Or, it was almost, for a while there, it was almost every Friday night,
Yeah.
probably 45 weeks of the year.
That's funny because that's one of my memories as well. And um, of you have people in your life that just want you around for long stretches of time.
Yeah.
And so that would be the thing, is we would play and have fun, and then I would just be ready. I guess this would be during the summertime, and I'd be ready to go home, happy to come back and goof around, play again tomorrow. but he's like, stay the night. I'm like, I don't want to stay. I want to go home. I want to be in my bed. I want to go home and eat my food. I was grateful for whatever they had to offer. But it's hard to speak up for yourself. So we were talking about how sometimes it's hard to ask for help. Sometimes it's just hard to speak up for your own needs and desires. So as a kid, I loved Scotty. He was my dearest buddy. But I wanted to go home. Again, it's just across the street. But our friendship could be challenging because he didn't want to take no for an answer. And so I didn't know how to just say, to assert myself, to just do what I wanted to do, not needing him to do anything, but I don't want to be here. I'm happy to come back tomorrow. So it is one of my regrets from then. And even now, sometimes I don't know how to assert myself of what I want to tell someone else no. And it's frustrating because I'm happy to take a no from somebody else. I let them off the hook easily, but I have a hard time when someone won't let me off the hook. They ask something of me, and if I say no, I didn't say no, rashly. I thought about it. I don't want to do that. So it's I would say that was the biggest challenge among a person who I cared for deeply. As silly as that initially may sound, I think you get where I'm going with it, but that when someone wants from you something you don't want to offer.
Yeah.
But I'll say this of Scotty, and this is where I commend him.
Yeah.
He was fearless. He would
Yeah.
try stuff. Now, a lot of times we get hurt in the trying, or we would break something, burn something would go awry. But I do appreciate how courageous and fearless he would be. They were terrible ideas. We just never got into any of my terrible ideas. Now, what that would tell you is I had no great ideas, but he would push boundaries, and I think there can be value to that. Right. Sometimes we push him too much, but I do appreciate that he had me try things, some of which I didn't want to do, and sometimes it worked out well, and other times it didn't. Right. But that is a good quality. It could drive you nuts, for doing it, but there was also a part of you like, good for you, buddy. He's trying to make the most of a day in a different way than I would have. But I can't help but think, good for you, Scotty. Good for you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that as a kid, I can look back and see that a lot of it was just he had a lot of energy. A lot of it might have been kind of what we call HDHD. What do you call that when somebody has
ADHD, maybe?
Yeah, ADHD energy. I don't know, but he was very much in the moment kind of person. And we just had a lot of I would call them as kids joyful time of just whether it be playing with something. Like I can remember we had. Let's get into a few memories here. I can remember we had the old Pac-Man like little video game.
Sure.
It was a video game that was about like this big, and it had a little screen on it, and two players could play it. And he and I, you might even remember that game he had. I don't know.
Sure.
He and I played that thing for like 3 hours one night until we got as far as we could. Got as many pretzels or whatever it is you win on Pac-Man. I mean, we just played like a marathon of that thing.
Sure.
And golly, and he had this like. Part of his problem might have been that his parents spoiled him a tad. I don't know, but as Russell knows, not many people would share this with me, but he had a Pac-Man room. His bedroom was Pac-Man.
Yeah.
He had Pac-Man floor to ceiling. He had the newest and coolest toys half the time, including something called ColecoVision.
Well, that's funny you say that because when you mentioned video games, that's what I recall. We played Coleco, and we eventually got into Nintendo, but I think early on it was kind of Atari or Coleco, and he was the only kid I knew who had it. I've never known anybody since, but there would be Cubert and other things.
Donkey Kong.
Okay. And the controller, it was weird, and we would only play it a few times. I could never quite figure it out. It never was like my native video game system, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so yes, I think of Coleco and Scotty. If I think of Scotty, 25-50% of the time it comes back to a thought of those video games with them.
Those are
It does.
we spent many times playing that Donkey Kong game on that ColecoVision. I tell you, I can remember. And I remember, oh gosh, we didn't have a computer in my house. I didn't own a computer till the year 2000. I mean,
Yeah.
but he had this weird, I mean, that was almost like some sort of, it was almost like a computer console. I
Yeah,
don't,
it was interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, just kind of to speak of them, the parents for a moment.
Uh-huh.
You know, they would do well to provide for their kids, and this is my perspective as an adult looking back on my view as a kid. But when I
Hmm.
would visit their house, it didn't seem that they were making upgrades to the adults in what they had, but it was all going to the kids. And I think we try to care for our kids and grandkids that way. That
Mm,
um, the furnishings were always the same, and I just point that out. Is like you'd make sure the kids
that is
had
true.
something new, but maybe mom and dad went without, so kids could have the latest
Oh
and
yeah. I think some parents overly sacrifice
yeah.
sometimes. Like I try to be like, I just got back from Target, by the way, a few minutes ago. They are not a sponsor.
Yeah.
But, um, and I bought my kids like $1.20 Hot Wheels cars, each.
Yes.
They bought three of them. And to me, I'm so cheap. I was like, I don't know if we need to buy those. But like a lot of people, they'll buy their kids like, you know, oh, every time you go to the store, there's $40 drop down.
Sure.
And I think and you're right though, because golly, Steve and Vicky, I remember my sister went back and visited for some reason, or maybe it was my mom. She had to
Yeah.
go visit Vicky after they divorced. People, listen, I know we're giving like this whole biography of Scott and his family here. After they divorced around 88 or 89. And first off, I can't imagine what that does to a puberty kid that's
Yeah.
13 years old seeing your parents get divorced. It's probably not fun, especially if it's a bad divorce. But they indefinitely, like they didn't leave. Only the dad left. Like he
Yeah.
moved on and whatever. So my mom went back like in I want to say 2005 or something like that, 2004. And she was like, Gene, that house looked the same. She was like, that piano's still sitting by the wall. The couch is still, it's the same couch
I
still
can picture
sitting
it.
there. They've upgraded their TV. That's
Yeah.
about it. It was something like that. It's like same table still in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well, it's funny how we all have different values with money of what we will spend on and what we won't.
Yeah.
And I think for all of us, we have like flashes of memories with different people. And so we talk about Scotty. And
Yeah.
one of the things I remember in Indulgence is going out to eat with his family. They were so great. And, of times where it wasn't going to the fanciest place, but here's the Waffle House memory I had.
Hmm.
Is we went to Waffle House and Scotty would get the same thing every time. And he would get the grilled chicken sandwich with hash browns, which isn't notable, except for he would get two of the plates. So
Okay.
not double hash browns. It was, I want a chicken sandwich with hash browns twice. And so I can't recall if they came out twice together or if it was consecutive, but he was like a tall, skinny kid, but he
Yeah.
could put down some food. And I thought, I didn't know it was even an option to get two meals. It never occurred to me. But
Wow.
it was funny. It's all those little details. And so even with my kids now, they're about
Yeah.
18 years old and they're about to graduate, is they joke with me is if we go out to eat, I just want them to be happy. So we sometimes will go somewhere and one of them doesn't want something. And instead of you're going to get it and you're going to like it, it's like, okay, let's just make an adventure of it. So they
Hmm.
wanted to go to Bojangles breakfast the other day. I was happy to take them. I myself didn't want Bojangles. I wanted from a nearby barbecue place. I was like, we're going to go to both. And if you can get something from one place and something else from another, it's not, it wasn't anyone pitching a fit. It was none of that. It was just, let's kind of make a little fun out of it. And so they were, as we're eating, they're like, Dad, you do realize it's a little strange. We go to more than one place. I'm like, well, we're just trying to have a little fun with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I was trying to think. Now I'm trying to look in my memory bank here, and I'll have to sit down sometime to start writing down things that I remember from the old Scott. Stephen Vicky House,
Yeah.
if you recall.
And I tell you, he almost shot my eye out, like little Red Ryder BB
Oh my
gun.
gosh!
Oh, it's
What
so
did you try to shoot an apple off your head? What did you do?
well. We did have this thing where we'd line up against his house and we
Hmm.
shoot each other in the back of the leg. Now this is like a little pump thing, so you're hardly doing anything. It's like, can you do one pump with the BB, not a pellet but a BB? But this one time we had the 10 pump pellet gun, and he wanted to. I may have told this story. If I did, I tell this story. Oh, I'm so sorry. But we went up to the speed limit sign, which was across the street from where you would sometimes catch the bus, or I would catch the bus where we had the basketball goal we talked about.
Yeah.
And there's a speed limit sign right there. And he wanted to put the BB gun right up against it and shoot it to see what would happen to the metal. I'm like, don't do that. It's going to ricochet. It's going to hit me in the eye. He's like, it's not going to hit you in the eye. So I back up. And he's like, it's not going to hit you in the eye. And he shoots. And it hit me in the eye. Now, thankfully, it caught my eyelid.
Oh, good.
And not the actual. But I honestly could have been blinded. So, like, I knew the Lord said, don't do it. It's a bad idea. I tell him, don't do it. But
now, wait a minute. Okay, go ahead.
But this is where I should have just listened to the Spirit
Yes.
and listened to myself. Instead, Scotty, no, you're going to be fine. And pow, and then one time, I don't know if I told this story. I'm sorry. I've got all my Scotty stories. Again, we talked about
you're good.
Courageous and adventurous.
You're good. They'll get over it.
And we went roller skating in the 7th grade. It was like skate night or something. And cute girl, 8th grader, yet 1 year older than me. It was her birthday party. But the church crew, we all went skating. I didn't skate very well. Scotty and his family skated a lot. And so we're on the skating rink and he gets behind me and he begins to push me. I'm like, don't push me. I'm going to fall. No, you're not going to fall. So he's pushing me faster and faster. I'm like, Scotty, stop pushing me. So he does. So he lets off, but now I'm all off balance. I fall back and land on my wrist and I break my wrist.
Oh.
Now, I don't cry because I don't want the cute girl whose birthday it is to see me crying on the ground. So Scotty comes over. You okay? Yeah, I think I broke my wrist. Oh, you didn't break it. If you had broke it, you'd be crying. So I get in the car. My mom picks me up to take me to the hospital. And the moment she picks me up, I start crying. But I didn't want to cry in front of him or the young lady. And I probably should. Maybe I could have gotten some sympathy. Her name was Maggie. If I had cried in front of Maggie. But it's fun. I think we have people in our lives. Scotty, for me, was one who, as we said, would push the boundaries. And sometimes it was against my will. But other times, even though I didn't want to admit it, I was having fun. We're, kind of on the razor's edge. And so sometimes that can be exciting. But then other times it goes in a direction you don't want.
Now, okay, are you the neighbor that got ran over?
That's me. That was me.
Tell me Scotty was not part of that.
No, he was not part of that. Jason White, your buddy Jason White, was a part of that. Now, he's not to blame. But it was summer. I was almost 5 years old. So not even in kindergarten yet. Basically a year away from going to kindergarten. And it's the end of the day after dinner. And I wanted to show Jason White, your best buddy, my Matchbox car, which you had mentioned, Matchbox cars. And I would keep mine in my sock. And so I was going to come right down the sidewalk across the street. He lived right across. Scotty lived catty corner from me. Jason White lived right across the way. And I guess I didn't look. And I got hit, broke both of my legs, the femurs. And it's one of my first. I really don't remember much of life before that happening. But Jason was there. Scotty was there for my recovery both. And neither of them get blamed. I get blamed for not looking both ways before crossing the street.
Oh, man. So you rode the bus with Scotty and Jason then, right?
I guess so. Jason, he moved kind of not too much later. So I don't have recollection. We probably did, but I think by 1st or 2nd grade, he had probably moved just about a mile down the road. But I don't know. I don't remember us getting to share the bus. He was my best buddy. He moved miles and hundreds of miles away. It felt like, because I was 5. He moved 0.9 miles away, less than a mile away, but it felt like he moved to Iowa. I never saw him.
So you rode the bus with Scotty then?
Yes.
Okay, so what was, I never knew this side of Scotty. What was he like on the school bus? Was he a pretty well-behaved young man, or did he hit that razor's edge?
He was a lot to handle. Not with me. I don't really have that many bus memories other than this. I was always falling asleep on the bus. I think that was my thing. You talk about him always having an endless amount of energy. He was Tigger. He was just Tigger, just go, go, go. And I was more kind of Winnie the Pooh. And I just, I
That's why
wanted
you got
to,
along so well.
I
Yeah.
wanted, yes. And I wanted to have honey and I wanted to nap and I was Garfield. And so I was always snoozing on the bus. Yeah, it is funny. Like, I don't think, I don't think we would have chosen one another to be friends later in life. But we as kids were inseparable.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that we don't know. I mean, we were physical neighbors, so we're right there. We're of the same age. You don't have all that many choices. So, you know, I was one of just 2 or 3 kids his age to choose from. And he was one of 2 or 3 kids my age to choose from. I don't remember choosing him or him choosing me. I have no memory of childhood before Scotty. He was just always there, similar to Jason White, was just always there until he moved. So I wish sometimes adult life were more like that, because friendships as kids are easy because they're there. It's just, who are your neighbors? But I don't know, Gene, if you've ever tried to make friends with your current neighbors, it can be challenging. Like, it's great if you go to church or you know someone from work, but if you don't have an obvious connection, just because you live in close proximity doesn't always mean you're going to play well together as adults, where as kids, at least it seemed to be a lot easier.
The proximity, yeah. Well, did you guys hang out in not high school, but in elementary school, middle school? Did y'all hang out at the school? What was his social life like at school? Do you even remember?
No. So kind of my memory is, if we were hanging out, it was his house or wandering the neighborhood. We didn't spend a lot of time at my house, which is funny. I don't know. I don't know why that was. I was typically going to his house compared to him coming to me. He would sometimes come over. And then we were both active at our church, First Christian of Stone Mountain, Georgia. And out of my social life was either in the neighborhood with Scotty and friends, or at that church. So we didn't. I feel like his family was better. I think they were involved in PTA. I feel as though he was involved in Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts or something like that. They seemed to be more plugged in socially than maybe my family was. And so I remember them going to Panama City. I always wanted to go to Panama City. I didn't go to Panama City till later in life. Yeah, it's funny how we can be envious of just like these little details. So I was envious. We had like off-brand pizza. They had Domino's pizza, all these things. We talked about video games. He had a better remote control car than I did. I don't know what he would have been envious of me, but
so you don't really know much about his how he was in school then, as far as
no, we didn't. It was funny. In all of our time together, even though we were across the street neighbors, we rode the same bus, we never one time had a class together. Not one time.
Interesting.
And so elementary school, you kind of have the one teacher, so it's not that big of a deal. He got one class, I got a different one. But even when you're getting into middle school, where you're changing classes 2 or 3 times in a day, you figured we'd have industrial arts together or PE together. We get into high school, we just never did. It's almost a mystery how we never sat at a lunch table together. So he had his friends, I had my friends. We were best buddies in the neighborhood, but we did not. Our friend groups did not cross-pollinate.
Interesting. So when you were in high school then, and you would do you remember seeing him in the hallway?
Never.
Was it all just kind of like, hey, Scotty?
Yeah, almost never. I mean, so I wasn't a brainiac, but I was like the honors course, and I don't think he was the honors course. So you kind of get grouped, and you go to honors English, the other goes to regular English, and the classes aren't wildly different, but you end up running in different circles.
Fascinating.
And it was weird. It was weird. So I physically moved away, and then academically we moved away. At some point he stopped going to church. So it was sad. Like, our friendship kind of withered on the vine. As I mentioned earlier, we never had a big falling out, just life choices, these little choices that are made end up having a large effect over time. It's kind of like, if for any of us, if we get off course, day one,
Yep.
it's not that big of a deal, but over time, you're really far afield of where you were trying to go.
That's the reason I'm asking these questions. It's interesting to me to look at how that dynamic worked out when you have two. Because I was, in a lot of ways, like I said in the last episode, your neighborhood was sort of my de facto neighborhood because I had
Yeah.
two cousins that lived there, and it's fascinating to me to see to see how your best buddies in your neighborhood and your social interaction with church and everything, but as you grow older in middle school and high school, you know he's over there with that crowd
Yeah.
or whatever,
Right.
or you just
Right. Yeah. It was never.
I picture you and him bumping up each other in the bathroom saying, "Oh, hey Scotty, how's it going? Oh, good,
Yeah.
see ya."
I wish there had been more of that.
Yeah,
There just wasn't, and in a curious kind of way.
yeah,
And when it comes to church involvement is different from faith,
hmm,
but I had never really been to church.
right,
Um, but the Lord got a hold of me in a way that it didn't seem, because, I don't know, as we talk about below the surface, it didn't seem that it landed with Scotty the way it landed with me.
mm.
In middle school, we had um, a youth pastor who just meant the world to us both.
Oh, what was his name, by the way?
Brian,
Right.
Brian, Brian Tees. But by the
Mhm.
time I got to high school, I kind of stopped seeing Charlie. That's my son. I kind of stopped seeing Scotty at church. He kind of went a different way, different friends, and I was really kind of ramping up my church involvement and
Mhm.
what the Lord was doing in my life. And not to say I didn't, I had all my own struggles. I was trying to make sense of. I was no longer living in that neighborhood. I had moved from Stone
Right.
Mountain to nearby Snellville, and I'm trying to make sense of new friends. And, well, why don't these new people love me like Scotty and his family did? So, uh, as we were, kind of started with the sadness of Scotty's passing,
Mhm.
I am forever grateful for that family, mom, dad, son, daughter,
Right.
for what they meant to me and my whole family.
Mhm. Um, well, I was just trying to, had a lot of thoughts come in my mind about, you know, um, well, what you missed out on a lot of times on those Friday and Saturday nights. Whereas we would get there. I don't know if you ever came over on any of those Friday nights. I think I usually saw you the next day or on Sundays.
Yeah.
We would get there on a Friday night, and some of my best memories as a kid um, were, going there on a Friday night, getting there like I think a lot of times we would eat beforehand maybe, and it was basically me. I had older brother, older sister. Yeah, they were bored usually because it was just me and Scotty, and he has a younger sister. Her and my sister were different. They weren't
Yeah.
doing anything. So my brother and sister plopped down on the couch and watch MTV or something.
Sure, sure.
And parents in the kitchen talking about who knows what. Um, and me and Scotty just straight to his bedroom or something like that and playing with whatever toy we could
Yeah,
grab.
yeah.
And usually his dad, Steve, would order pizza from Ken's Pizza, of
Oh,
course.
Ken's. I remember Ken.
Oh
Sure.
yeah, he would order Ken's Pizza, um, and usually like at 9:30 or 10 o'clock
They
at
ate
night.
so late. They'd always eat so late. What are they doing?
And he would get everything on it. And I mean, it was
Yeah.
just, and I'm just a meat guy. I just want pepperoni or
Yes,
beef
you're
or.
totally right. I remember them getting Supreme Pizza.
And
What
I was
made
sitting there
them
as a
think I
kid.
wanted vegetables? I'm 8 years old. Can I
I'm
get
sitting there.
pepperoni?
My mom gives me a piece, and I'm like, all right, and I just pick all the little pieces off.
Yes. Get the olives off my pizza.
Yeah, olives and peppers. I'm like, I don't want peppers on my
I don't want
pizza.
that. What are they
So that
doing?
was like it was, and sometimes my mom would splurge and she'd get us a little side, pepperoni or whatever, and that was great.
Yes.
But that
That
just
is,
that was a lot of our, and some of the best memories though is just uh countless. We just came off Halloween, going through your neighborhood trick or
yes.
treating with their
Yes.
family. I don't remember if you came along the ride when we would walk through the neighborhood or not, but
No, I think so. I mean, I don't have specific memories of us all together, but my
yeah,
memories of trick or treating were with Scotty. So surely we must have done it.
okay, yeah,
And
yeah,
one, I don't remember how old we would have been, but it must have been probably eighth grade, because ninth grade I moved away. So like my last Halloween there, I guess we're eighth grade and we go trick or treating, and we get turned away for being told we're too old. Now, I've dressed up. I'm not a hoodlum.
Get
I'm
out of
in
here, old man.
costume. I'm just, but no, you're too old. And I just think if anyone shows up at your house with a good attitude and a costume,
Yeah.
they can be 105 years old. I'm not telling them no, but we got turned away, and I was
Oh
so
man,
bummed. And that was the
that's
end of
funny.
my trick or treating.
My biggest memory, like I said, I have a lot of memories of going to that neighborhood because we didn't grow up in a neighborhood. So my mom would a lot of times just take us over there,
Yeah.
and you know, my dad and his dad, they'd sit there and drink beer and talk, I guess, and um, me and the family and whatever, we'd take our bags to go around your neighborhood, and we'd also catch up with my aunt that lived in the
Okay.
neighborhood with
Yeah.
my cousin,
Yeah.
and we'd go trick or treating around with them. And I remember I dressed up as Superman one time, and accidentally tore the crotch out of the the costume,
Oh,
which was like it's like as I was trying to walk up a hill or something like that.
maybe that's why Superman always wears his trunks on the outside. So he has the double layer.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no
my
plastic mask.
recollection of costumes from the '80s, the real frustration is that let's say you're He-Man or Batman, it wasn't good enough to have the symbol. They would have the face of the character and the
Uh-huh.
name, so the grown-up knows it's Batman. Like no one needs to know. Can it actually look like
Yeah.
Batman? No, it's He-Man's smiling face, and it says He-Man. And thankfully, we have moved away from that.
Yeah. Well, but yeah, I think that as I look back, I agree with you on their family though. They were a very welcoming family looking back, and we talked about it a little bit last time. Vicky would talk a lot to my aunt Deborah, and sometimes if I spent the night there with Scotty, um, Aunt Debbie would come over and they would sit out on their front porch. And, Debbie was a smoker, so she'd light up her cigarette and my aunt would sit next to her you know, and we would just sometimes sit there and listen to them talk. And
It is so great. I do think that's something that sometimes younger generation misses out on is
yeah,
of just letting the kids sit at the feet of the grown-ups and might be confused, might miss the importance of it, but getting to hear grown-up conversation where the kids don't have to be the focus of the conversation. Just hearing grown-ups talk about something
mhm,
other than, telling you what to do or the worries of life. I mean, obviously they're talking about the worries. I guess what I'm saying is
right.
it not having to be a kid centric conversation, but
Yeah.
just letting the grown-ups talk and to sit and listen to them. And I can picture porch, their orange plastic chairs, kind of semicircle half ball chairs with the white
Yep.
metal footing. And yeah, I can remember so much about their house. We would climb around the side of the house on the brick kind of base of it. I can feel the wood, just all of it. I can smell
Uh-huh.
it. I can see it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you
You
know,
can't, I mean, in 2024, we don't realize that the house smelled like smoke. And we didn't
yeah.
even think about it back then, did we?
Sure, sure. And your little dog Trixie.
Oh yeah, Trixie. Thank you. Yeah, I forgot about
Oh,
Trixie, the cutest
oh,
dog, poodle dog ever.
poodle dog then just bounce the bat there at the end. But
Hmm.
yeah, remember their vehicles. I remember all of this. We may have talked about, my brothers and sisters, we'd argue who gets to sit in the front. They would argue who gets to sit on the hump in the middle, which is they would go three wide. So mom is driving, and then one kid is in the middle, and the other is
Yeah.
on the far end. And you would think the middle seat is the worst seat. I don't want to be in the middle seat. But when you had bench seating instead of bucket seatings, I guess it was prime real estate. And I just remember they would go back and forth, fighting over who gets it, who doesn't. And I would think that's the last place in the world I want to sit. But we all have things that we're territorial about, even
Oh
if they
yeah.
don't really have value. It's just I want to have it, and I don't want you to have it, even if
Well,
really no one else even wants it.
you could probably appreciate this because you mentioned the Panama City vacations. I went on at least one or two of those,
Yeah.
and the one that I remember, you'll be glad to know we went down there, and I think we did Shipwreck Island, which was a water park,
Okay.
and that was a lot of fun. That was the first time I'd ever been to a water park, but I think that it rained. We were there for like Friday, Saturday, Sunday night because it was
Yeah.
like a Labor Day weekend, and it rained 2 of the 3 nights. Like it was not even sunny until like Monday
For
morning.
sure. It didn't
And
matter. I was back in Georgia just wishing I was there.
yeah,
Um, they would go to Panama City. We would go to Fort Walton. They would
uh,
go to Gatlinburg. We would go to Cherokee, North
uh-huh.
Carolina, whatever it was. And so, yeah, it was, they just always seemed not out of reach. Like they weren't going to on Hawaiian vacations, it
You're
was
right.
always just one step beyond, and that can be that can be what's so frustrating. But like, it's not wildly different. It's just
Right.
one
Well,
little more step.
I will say this, that my dad told us, like, I remember him talking. I can remember this. I don't know how I remember this. I remember him complaining to my mom because they wanted to do one or two more things. And
Yeah.
my dad was like, they ran out of money. I was like telling him the whole time, you're going to run out of money if you keep doing all this. And he was like,
Sure.
because we didn't do a few of the things. And,
Yeah.
my dad just thought it was so funny that they were just like spending
Down to
everything
the
they
last
had on that
penny.
vacation
Down to the
and went
last
home
penny.
broke.
Making the most of yes, yes. We'll hitchhike on the way home if we have to.
Like, how you
It's
going
so
to get
funny.
gas?
It's
Oh,
just
man.
neat. It's neat the lasting influence and impressions these people can make. I mean, we're talking about people for memories from 35 years ago,
Oh, yeah.
40 years ago, even longer. I mean, it's neat
Yep.
how it happens, and then the impression is lasting, and then as time passes, our interpretation or appreciation of those events change. I mean, I'm
Absolutely.
sad Scotty's life ended the way that it did. I hate that his last number of years were filled with heartache. But I'm grateful that even as that has happened, we can remember the parts of our life with him and those who've gone through similar struggles, that life is hard and depression is
Hmm.
real, and there's not always the happy ending that we want. But life is important and valuable, and we just have to love each other and appreciate them and tell them when we can instead of after the fact, of course, is what
Yeah.
we all try to do.
Well, I think that learning, God teaches us, especially those that belong to the Lord, He teaches us many lessons through circumstances like that. As far as I know, I didn't become a Christian until somewhere around the age of 15, 16.
Okay.
But I did get baptized at 11. So who knows? Maybe I became a Christian then. But anyway, it doesn't matter. What matters, though, is that, like you said, God's plan of teaching me about life, I went through that, spending time with Scotty and my cousin Brian that had lived in his neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, and there were so many different parallels, of life. For instance, that other, we don't have another hour, but my aunt that lived in that same neighborhood, it was an oddly similar story in some ways. Like the parents divorced almost within a year of each other.
Wow.
Um, the mom and dad had divorced, and the mom ended up moving away, and the dad kept the house. And they had their own, um, side trail of story of going through divorce and having to live with my uncle for a while and all that kind of stuff. And I even met Jason that you talked about. I even met him once at Scotty's house as a kid, and I can kind of remember meeting him. And I can kind of remember Vicky telling my Aunt Debbie that she loves that boy Jason. He's such a nice kid, and she would babysit him sometimes. And then lo and behold, in 2000, I got a buddy Scott that I went to college with come home, and Scott knows him from Clarkston because Jason lived in Clarkston for years and grew up there.
That's
And Jason
great.
had moved to Clarkston. They went to the same church together. And I come home during, after college to my friend Scott's house, another friend, Scott. And Jason's sitting on the couch. And
I know you.
yeah, and Scott's like, "This is my friend Jason," and we're chit chatting a little bit, and Jason's like, "Wait a minute, are you related to Scotty?" Blah blah blah, and and we're like, "Wait a minute, I do kind of remember you,
Oh,
from
good.
20 years ago."
I don't
So
think
bizarre.
I missed that detail. When you and I reconnected after Scotty's passing, you had shared with me how close you and Jason were. It did not occur to me that that was kind of an adult development. I
Uh-huh.
just thought, because when you told me, I was like, oh, that's a detail I didn't know that.
Ah,
And so it didn't make sense at the time. Like, how could they have been close as little kids? And I have not known that. And now
right.
it makes sense. You're in college or beyond, that y'all connect in a way with,
Yeah, yeah.
the friendship has built over these years since. So that it clears up something I wouldn't have thought to even ask about. But yes, I was a little confused as like how that happened, but that makes sense.
Oh yeah, yeah. And Jason's own stories are just he's got his own wild story. Tune into the other podcast to hear some of his old stories, but his story of your neighborhood is I I love Jason. Jason, if you're listening, Jason is the king of repeat stories, and I know that the house he lived in your neighborhood was his favorite house that he ever lived in growing up.
You've heard that before, I guess.
Yeah, and so some of your details of your neighborhood I can know a little bit from Jason because he moved there early,
Yeah.
um,
Well,
but yeah, so
my details of his family is I remember their Tupperware, their plastic cups. They had like the real deal Tupperware. Their sweet tea was so incredibly sweet and delicious. And his Transformers, for whatever reason, when my mom or anybody would buy me gifts, they would never buy me the villains. So I'd have G.I. Joe or
uh-huh.
Transformers or whatever, but I never had any one for them to fight. And I would never get the main character. So in Transformers, I never had Optimus Prime. Why do I not have Optimus Prime? I have all these other no-name characters. I didn't have Optimus Prime. And then when it came to G.I. Joe, I didn't have Duke or whoever the main guys would have been. But Jason always did. He had the leaders, and of course he did, and he had the villains, and he just had the right toys.
Oh, wait a minute though. Let me stop you if I can,
Okay.
because Jason has emphasized this to me many times, which I knew as a kid. Tell us about your neighbor Russell Brown and his toy collection.
Well, that's interesting because Russell Brown, I remember for them being very active, wiffle ball, pool in the backyard, trampoline, going to taekwondo or kung fu, whatever they called it, karate, whatever. But I don't remember them having a toy collection. So he would tell you they had a toy collection.
Oh, well, I can remember bits of it, but apparently, and I remember Scotty emphasizing this. Russell Brown got all the best toys. Like
interesting.
Like I mean, apparently he had the aircraft carrier of G.I. Joe.
Oh, it's so funny. Our perspective. I would have told you that was Jason. So he's telling you it's Russell Brown. Scotty's telling you, yeah.
Jason might have had, but I don't think he did.
No, it's funny because. And I'm just using it as an example, but like I have no recollection of the Brown family ever playing with toys. They were always outside play, is from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And they had lots of toys, like big stuff in the backyard. They had some sort of Star Wars kind of treehouse thing. They had a shed filled with all the outdoor toys. They had a school bus in their backyard for a long time.
I remember they added on to their house.
They had, they had a lot of good things going. But it's funny. Isn't it funny the things that the little details and better than me and you had it better, And
I do remember that Russell had cool toys.
That obviously all these parents, moms and dads, they're trying to make sense of their life and they're raising their kids and sorting through their marriage and jobs and things. But, for us as little kids, largely they're just, well, that's the responsible parent in that person's family, whether they were responsible or not. And so it's funny, I can remember faces and voices of those grownups, but I don't remember a lot of their decisions. I think you might have been more astute than I was to some of those details.
For whatever reason, I was just wired to. I have these very vivid segments of memory of things like that, And it is crazy. But anyway, well, we got to go, man.
Well, that's great. Last time we spoke, you wrapped up with chili. What's for dinner tonight?
I don't remember if the wife told me.
I'm sure it's delicious, whatever.
Yeah. So, okay. So like, are you, we didn't get to chat about whatever. We spent so much time talking about these memories. I'm going to see if I can coordinate you and Jason. Are you ever available at nighttime?
Sure.
Are you? Okay. Yeah. Jason's usually not available till like Thursdays after 8:30. Is that ever a problem for you?
You let me know.
All right. We'll try to make that happen because I'd like to hear some conversation between you guys.
Well, yeah, it's funny. I mean, so near and dear to me. Our friendship was even shorter. I told you Scotty's hours kind of stretched on into middle school. My friendship with Jason was really from like 3 years old to about 6, and that was about it. So
that's about it.
Even more concentrated, but I love him still. His mama is so sweet. I haven't seen his sister in 40 years, but I would love to. I would love to hear some of his perceptions of my family because
he's probably got some
letting me share mine of others, but I would love to hear. So
he and I are some of his random access memory is like tenfold of mine. I mean, that kid remembers some very, very strong things. Oh, I was gonna. I almost forgot to ask you.
Sure.
You mentioned youth pastors at it was Stone Mountain Christian Church,
Right.
right?
Sure.
Was there another youth pastor named Danny? Maybe.
Well, no, that was the senior pastor, Danny Shoemake. That was the main pastor. I'm friends with him still. So there was
Okay.
a youth pastor named Jim Joyner. That was kind of my elementary years.
I think I'm thinking of Jim.
Okay.
Hmm.
And then there was a guy named Ray Duhan there for just a year or two, then Brian Tees. But Danny Shoemake was the pastor kind
Okay.
of all through those many years. For 20, 25 years, he was there.
Okay. I think I'm thinking of Jim because we did Sunday school. I usually do it if they did it when I spent the night or whatever. And I remember Jim. I think it was Jim was kind of a was he a hyper guy or kind of an excitable guy?
Yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
Probably so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember him talking in Sunday school and telling us, yeah, back in the day, if God wanted something from you in the Old Testament, he'd just come up and he'd say, "Hey," and he'd just like yelling. We were all like,
That sounds about right.
yeah, that was my memory there on that. And and all the other thing is too, I tried to look that church up a while back. Do you know what became of that church? I know it
I
dissolved,
do.
but
So it changed names.
uh-huh.
It moved. Let me get this right. It was in Stone Mountain. It moved kind of out towards Loganville, and it has since moved again and merged with a church in Monroe.
Oh.
And I want to say Life Bridge, but I might have that wrong. But yes, it moved from Stone Mountain, 15 minutes down the road, Highway 78, sometime around 2000.
Okay.
And then the last year or two, it moved another 15 minutes down the road and is now in Monroe.
Wow.
And yeah.
And the old pastor, is he retired or what does he do?
No, he's there on staff at last check. He's not the lead pastor now. He's, I think, an associate of some sort.
Wow.
We touch base on the phone maybe every 2 or 3 months. I worked with him when I was in my 20s. So he went and worked at a church after Stone Mountain. He worked at a church in Oconee County near the University of Georgia. And I was a youth pastor for him for about 10 years, from 98 until 2008. I was kind of off and on a couple of different times. I kind of bounced between radio, youth ministry, and college ministry at the University of Georgia, that 10-year stretch. So of those 10 years, sometimes I did 2 of those 3, other times 3 of those 3. All of them are always part-time. Sometimes it varied here and there. And then I moved to Birmingham in 2008.
Wow.
But,
okay.
Yeah.
Are you driving back to Atlanta to see the Honey this weekend?
Seeing
Assuming
the
you are still together.
kids.
I don't know.
Sweet. Yeah. So I work in Birmingham and all my people in Georgia, and I'm a road warrior on I-20 most weekends. So
Okay. And she lives like in the you told me last time.
yeah, she's in Gainesville. She's a teacher. Now she's a what do they call it? She's not a teacher. She's a instructional coach. So she is a coach of other teachers and is flourishing and loving it, and she's a delight. And so yeah, her daughter is doing well as a sophomore in high school, and my kids are seniors in high school, and they're trying to figure out what comes next for them with school, and we'll see. I think my son wants to do tech, and my daughter is convinced she wants to do something that doesn't get her the Hope Grant, so she wants to go elsewhere. I don't know why she wants to do that, Gene. Tell her she doesn't need to go out of state, but that's what she wants to do.
I don't even know what to call our friendship, because I'm not going to say that. I started to say that as a new friend, but we're not new friends. We're kind of old friends.
No, we're new friends. We're new friends. We were childhood acquaintances. We are new friends, Gene. Friends.
But I'm not going to be that new friends. I'm not going to be that new friend that asks you probably what your entire family is asking you when you're going to give her a ring. But
well,
maybe one day.
It's funny because the pastor you asked about, who I've known for 40 years of my life, we don't have a single phone call without him asking me. But we could talk on a Tuesday, and he'll ask me. And I'll talk to him the next day. That is always not a question, the first question. I'm like, Danny, I talked to you 4 hours ago. We've been, Mandy and I have been together for 7 years. I don't know. We're long distance. I'm in Birmingham. She's in Georgia. Well, I don't know. Her kids are there. My kids are here. But yes, he and I could, yes. Hey, yeah. I could go to lunch and come back, and his question will be, so when you gonna marry that girlfriend of yours?
Danny, what was his last name?
Who's that?
What was his last name again? Danny
Shoemake.
Danny Shoemake. Okay.
Danny Shoemake. What a delight. He and his wife both.
Wow.
I met them. My family did. Well, my family knew him, but when I was hit by that car we talked about when I was 4 years old, he came to visit me in the hospital because my granddad went to that church, and because he was so kind to my family in our time of need with me getting hit by a car. My mom and dad said we need to go to church, and we need to go to that church. So
Wow.
it all comes full circle.
Wow. That's cool. That's very cool. He probably would remember my family, I think, if you want to
Sure.
mention us, because well, my mom, my sister, and I went to that church a lot during
Great.
during
Yeah.
a period. So, um, that's interesting. All right. Well, I'm going to let you go, man, and have
Thank-
fun with your drive.
Love
And
it.
you know, I'll, I'll try not to ask you about the ring thing.
No, you're doing fine. It just needs to
Oh
be,
man.
yeah, just anytime.
All right. Well,
Anytime.
Russell, we'll get you back on with Jason. I'll touch base with Jason and see when we can have you on, because I'll just sit back and eat the popcorn as y'all reminisce.
Now you have a lot more stories to tell. I will listen to you. I will ask questions of y'all. We'll see. Well, I'll have fun together.
As the little river band said, reminiscing.
Perfect.
All right. Have a good one, man.
See you, Gene.
All right.